Hey everyone, my name is Randy Kim from the Bun Me Chronicles podcast. And before I begin, I want to offer a trigger warning as the topic will revolve around suicide, mental health, forced institutional care, and anything that's tied to the topic of suicide. So I hope that for those that are listening can, take their time and also know that it is not an easy topic to take on, but I hope that you will have the opportunity to be able to hopefully get an idea of how we address this issue in the month of Suicide Awareness Month in September. And I brought in my friend Jung Messenger, and Jung has been a person that I have known for a number of years, like probably going back to 10 plus years by this point. And I knew them through the the Asian American LGBTQIA spaces, like through I2I. And and that was like during the time when I was starting to try to find belonging in the queer Asian community, which, prior to that, there was none for me to be involved in. And I felt like moving into the city of Chicago after living in Korea for a number of years, I wanted to make that reconnect. I wanted to make that connection and see and find where my belonging is. And Jung has been one of those friends for me. And I've been very happy to have them on because, Jung and I had talked last week about, we were just having a random conversation. And one of the things that Jung brought up was like, well, I know that you had gone through now the 1 year of what happened to you when I was hospitalized. And I did not realize, I forgot that it was Suicide Awareness Month. And I think it got me to really think deeply about what that journey has looked like for me since then. But also, I think this is a conversation that we needed to have. And, Jung has been a friend of mine who has seen me and witnessed me at a very difficult time in my life. And I know that we have been there for each other through some of the more challenging periods of life. And um, I will say that in Jung's background, I want to say that Jung is a master of all trades. I looked at their bio and I remembered some of it. I didn't remember all of it, but what I can share with you about Jung Messenger is so Jung has been doing community organizing work. They're an educator, facilitator, mutual aid organizer, resource mobilizer, community grief and health worker, writer, and they've been doing a lot of work in the racial, gender, disability, immigration, reproductive, and healing justice movements for the past 2 decades through the local, state, and national nonprofits, philanthropy, grassroots community organizations, and collectives. Since 2022, they've been the owner and principal of Yojung LLC, where they offer consulting, coaching, and grief care dedicated to the cultivation, flourishing, and growth of people of the global majority and queer, trans, and non-binary, disabled, chronically ill, and neurodivergent, and migrant and diaspora communities. They're a street medic, movement care worker, avid reader, hongmo drummer, and devote time to the Rogers Park Free Store Liberation Library and the Unitarian Universalist Prison Ministry of Illinois. That is quite a mouthful here, and I'm just going to say that that is the reason why I look to you as a friend, and also why I look to your work because of all of the many wonderful, necessary things that you have been doing and what you've been able to share knowledge about through these experiences. So, Jung, I know it's been a long monologue from my end, but thank you so much for being on my show, and I'm looking forward to having this important conversation.
Thanks for having me, Randy, and thanks for being really open to this suggestion that I had to have a conversation that would really center and think about mental health, especially around suicide and suicidality. I know that we've both had our own experiences with that, with being survivors of suicide, and um, I thought that it would be an interesting format with you, not just in the role of host, but like with us in conversation.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, as we think about this month. So thanks for being open to
Absolute,
me and my suggestions.
absolutely. And, and I also want to like say from the beginning that I'm not a clinical licensed therapist, but I know for you, you have done a lot of connected work in the social work and also working in trauma. And I wonder if you can clarify that up too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things I wanted to share too, I'm also not a licensed therapist, but my professional background and some of my schooling is in social work. So I have experience doing counseling and crisis intervention, trauma work, and grief work. But like I said, I didn't pursue licensure. I'm not currently working as a therapist. So I know that you and I both come to this conversation, but also have just had a lot of like phone conversations, in person conversations, text conversations about our experiences from the vantage point of people who have been through surviving suicide, not
Mhm.
necessarily as professionals. And so I hope that anyone who's listening is able to connect with that and knows that although there are like special ways that you can get training and experience supporting folks that you, this information doesn't necessarily have to be gate kept behind a degree or
Mhm.
a certification. It's information that we can share with each other in order to care for each other.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for naming that. And I want to like talk about, for both of us, how have we or how have you been holding up about 2025 with only a mere few months left? I mean, like for myself, I feel like I'm at a loss for words. I feel that it has gone by very quickly, but with so much that has kept piling on, and especially with this Trump 2.0 administration, which continues to be incredibly terrifying and setting the stage for more ominous things to happen. And I don't want this to sound like a doom and gloom conversation, but I think, for myself, I think for me, I've been trying to navigate. I've been burned out by the time I got to May, and then I had to spend the summer recalibrating. And I think it's been good for me the last few months to step away and trying to touch grass, which has been more my thing. I canceled Hulu several months ago before any of
You've
y'all had done
literally
it.
been touching grass. You've
Yes.
been you've been in
Yes.
like every forest preserve of Cook and DuPage County.
Yeah, like, like I would just say this, like why did like last summer I was binge watching the entire season of The Bear,
You
which is a
were,
horrible
which
mistake.
like, yeah.
Horrible mistake. Or not a smart move. And The Bear is through Hulu. So I'm like, you know what? No, not gonna have the same mistake again. And lo and behold, it worked to my benefit. And I'm just gonna say that yeah, I got ahead of the game from for a lot of people that just kind of was hanging on to the Hulu Disney World. But I'm just saying. But yeah, but for you, like how has navigating 2025 been like so far?
It's been really hard, and
Mhm.
it's I would say both the the past couple of years have been hard for various reasons, and then my life since the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020 as well, which I'm sure like we'll definitely be getting into conversation
Mhm.
about that. But I think for both you and I, and we've talked about this a lot as people who really care not just about reform, but about justice and equity and liberation. Like it's a really hard time to live in. It's a hard time um, to be a person who is neurodivergent, to be a
Mhm.
person who's racialized, to be a person who um, is diasporic and wasn't born in the U.S. It's a hard time to be a person that um, is not under the cisgender umbrella, to be a person who's queer. Um, yeah, the government is um, very opposed to to the existence of me and people like me,
Mhm.
um, and the people who many have been counting on to be a like quote unquote opposition government haven't necessarily been helpful either in pushing back on really fascist and authoritarian ideologies. Um, and I know like I have been organizing um, in support of disability justice,
Mhm.
especially around COVID safety, but around just disability in
Mhm.
general, have been organizing to oppose the genocide that is currently happening in Gaza, as well as the occupation of Palestinian land in general for several years, but especially over the last like 20 to 23
Mhm.
months. And it's, yeah, there are aspects of this work that have been very draining,
Mhm.
very hard to remember um, that being alive is supposed to be fun sometimes, that like we're supposed to enjoy this. And that, you know, also an aspect of our collective work is to like make sure that the next generation gets to survive as
Mhm.
well. Like
Yeah.
I have young people and children in my life who are
Mhm.
also neurodivergent and gender variant and gender expansive and racialized and disabled. And I want to see them become adults. And
Mhm.
um, in the world that we're living in, I know that they will, but I also know it's going to be really hard. Um,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so I have a lot of empathy and love for everyone who is trying to survive while they are also fighting back against um, all of the different forces that would rather see
Mhm.
us not survive.
Yeah. Like, what do you think has kept you going in this year when things feel so detrimental and so hopeless? Because, like, I
Mm.
know that I've had many conversations with you weekly on the phone, and the first 20 minutes is what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Why is such and such happening? Why is this so, like, why the fuck is this happening? And that is the conversation that I come at because it's like I'm reading this. I know that I would, see what you have shared on social media and I'll read what is going on. I don't watch the news anymore, but I will, definitely I definitely follow a lot of my friends who are in the activism movements or movement work. And it is incredibly disheartening. And I think that is why I spend a lot of time touching grass and sometimes just going out to just travel, not to like, kick back and have a cocktail, but more like just to kind of get away and just kind of like ground myself. But what has been ways for you to navigate your survival through this?
I think for me, one of the things that has held me together over the past 5.5 years since early 2020 has been connection and relationship
Hmm.
with other people. So I have worked really hard to have community in the particular neighborhood I live in
Hmm.
Chicago. For those who are not from Chicago, Chicago can be a very neighborhood rooted city and a very neighborhood based city. And I feel really rooted in the neighborhood that I live in here, and I've done a lot of work to keep that going. Um, and so I know that in moments where I'm not feeling well and like need medicine or there were times where I was recovering from surgery and
Hmm.
wasn't able to cook for myself, and lots of my neighbors like brought me food, or people will like go
Hmm.
to the drugstore for me, or I'll go get groceries for someone, or like we have ways that we're distributing like free diapers and household cleaning products and things like that. So that's one big thing. Um, another another thing that has been keeping me going the past year or
Hmm.
so has been pungmul
Hmm.
drumming, which is Korean drumming that comes out of the Korean agricultural and shamanistic traditions, as well as more recently, like Korean and Korean American organizing space and cultural organizing space. And so I'm part of a Pungmul group that meets here in Chicago that is made up of diasporic Koreans.
Hmm.
We're actually like majority queer and trans, and probably maybe like a third of us are adoptees. And so
Hmm.
it's folks from lots of different aspects of Korean diaspora, but it for me it fulfills and connects me to being Korean in like emotional and spiritual and political ways, and like really concretely has been very helpful that like I'm intentionally like hitting something once a week to just like get my energy out. So that has been really helpful. Um, and then, I think in terms of my life, like um, since my suicide attempt and like my
Hmm.
life since surviving suicide, which happened in like mid to late 2019. I've
Hmm.
called everything since then. I refer to it as my bonus years. And I
Hmm.
know that like this is time that I have been given. And so I try and make the most of it and
Hmm.
um, try and have that mindset. But
Hmm.
it has been really hard. Like there's a lot of things that I
Hmm.
used to enjoy that I don't anymore.
Hmm.
Um, like it is I love watching basketball. I love the NBA and the
Hmm.
WNBA, and um also like with with the onset of this most recent phase of ethnic cleansing and genocide in Palestine, specifically in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, like thinking about corporate sports has and knowing what I know about the connections between sports leagues in the US
Hmm.
and the Israeli state, a lot of which I've learned from folks like Dave Zirin and the campaign that exists now, like Athletes for Ceasefire. Like knowing those things, it makes watching an NBA game less fun. If
Hmm.
I'm like, on the weekend, like going out to march against Palestine, but then like coming back and like watching this piece of entertainment that not only is like propping up and like supporting the Israeli state, but also
Hmm.
like the US military. And so
Hmm.
um yeah, that's been a space where that's just one example of how I've had to like switch my interests, change my interests,
Hmm.
and like try and find enjoyment in things, because so many things are like not fun
Hmm.
anymore. And I haven't felt fun um, because of
Hmm.
just the horrific things that I've seen. So I can't even imagine what it's like
Hmm.
to experience them at all. Um,
Yeah.
but also like I know that you have been like going for lots of walks, going to concerts, like you've been
Hmm. Hmm.
traveling a lot. Like what are some of the specific things that have been keeping you going?
Yeah, I think what you just named are things that keep me going. Although, like, it is interesting how you bring up the NBA too, because I have started to reconsider some of the things that I do enjoy as entertainment, and that I have spent quite a bit of money on. For I have expensive taste, if y'all didn't know that by
My
now.
gosh, you do, you
Um,
bougie bitch.
and and I was talking to you the other day, like, I saw Coldplay, but now I'm like, you know what? I'm done with Coldplay. And for those that don't know, Chris Martin basically had played the whole respectability politics about Charlie Kirk's death, and like, I don't feel right about this. And it's like, look, I'm tired of this too inclusiveness that has to somehow humanize white supremacists. And Beyonce and Jay-Z, like the other day, they were caught on video and like having dinner with the Kushners, Jared Kushner and Ivanka
Mhm.
Trump. And I was like, you know what? It is incredibly disheartening. Yes, they are absolute capitalists. They are practically billionaires by now. But it also disappoints me because of the music that they have made, their audience that actually support their work. And to see this happen, knowing that it's 2025, knowing what the Trump administration has done, knowing what Trump has said about Beyonce is just like that's just one example. So I felt like I had to dial back the celebrity culture of standing in some ways. And I feel like that is something that I have to really think about for next year, or when I look into a concert, or what artists can I support, especially from the indie scene, that I feel like my investment will go far for like smaller artists versus like the Beyoncés or the Taylor Swift of the world where they are they don't need people like us to help them. So I think that's something I've been dialing back a lot on. I've System of a Down. That's another one that really disappointed me because Surge is like the only guy that I'm still trying to cross my finger. Please do not fall off the edge. Darren, Darren Malakian, um, basically got into a fight with some of his fans on Instagram, and he basically came out and says, "I'm the far middle," and I'm just like, you know, fuck you guys. I have seen a bunch of these groups artists this summer, and I'm like, there's a lot of things I could have done with that money by now. But it's like I had a great time then, but it's also like, you know what? I have to really seriously think about my choice of entertainment and how this idea of separating the art from the artist is like it's not benefiting us. It's actually continuing to create harm. And they're not going to be there to protect us when that time comes. And so that is something I have had to really think long and hard about this summer. Um, I think that for me, yeah, going to nature trails, I download the Odd Trails app and I am in love with it. Like I can find out different trails, what the conditions are, how many miles it is, and is it scenic, what's around there. I love those moments. And also like being very connected to community, especially in the digital sense. Like, yes, there's a lot to be said about social media and how it's been driven in a very toxic relationship um, with the powers that be that really, um, control the narratives of what's going on right now. But I also feel that there's so much friendships that have been formed the last couple of years since COVID, and I feel like I've been tapping more into that. And when I was doing the podcast, I felt like I was gaining more of a community. I was getting more of a sense of folks from places like in Vancouver, Canada, to Long Beach, California, to Boston, or to like Minnesota, or to Vietnam or Cambodia. I think that that has really been a saving grace for me in some ways. I think it has really helped to understand the world around me. And when I stepped out of the podcast like 2 years ago, I was really burned out. I was getting kind of annoyed when I was working on the last season. I was like, you know what? I feel like I just needed a couple more episodes to go. I'm done. And I think by that point, I felt that people stopped listening to podcasts. That was my thought because I remembered my ratings, my streaming numbers went down in my last season, even though I actually had a very strong guest lineup, and and I was thinking like this was still my best work, even though I was mentally checked out. But I also felt that now with what's going on politically, how podcasts have and for unfortunately have also been the instrument for a lot of right-wing activists and talking heads to get in the ears of Gen Z voters, particularly among the male population. And I think that was something that was very alarming to me from last election. And I felt, okay, I'm going to have to find a way to help be one of those folks that intercepts the narratives that they're trying to spew out. And and unfortunately it has become unchecked from blogs to podcasts to social media to different kinds of content that we consume and we need more of us intercepting these narratives because people's lives are at stake um and that's what we've seen in Gaza like like the Cambodian genocide that my dad's side of the family went through, none like no one knew what was happening in those 4 years. Cambodia was in a dark hole, and that was in the mid 70s. This is a very, very different time. This genocide in Gaza is the most live stream genocide event that has happened in our life that is happening in our lifetime. And yet, as frustrating and as infuriating as it is to see um, the inactions and the complicity of the U.S. government and the and the capitalistic vultures and political leaders that are um, doing this. It is also very important to see how there's so many voices that have really pushed back and starting to slowly change the narrative the past 2 years. Has it been frustrating for those that have been calling out from the rooftop? Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that there's power in our voices and what that could really mean. And I think that's part of like as I was trying to recover from what was a very difficult year, losing my brother earlier this year, and then before that, having to kind of like recalibrate my entire thought process, which nearly killed me. And I felt like I had to step away in order for me to be in a position where the things that actually made me very scared and um, that nearly destroyed my mental health, I felt like it was part of like I want to come back to be like, well, I feel like I need to talk about this. I feel like I need to talk about the things that have contributed to that, which is contributing to a lot of folks that have been in the front line for this. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like something that you are really speaking to, I think, is the idea that like most people are looking for connection
Mhm,
and belonging and validation
mhm,
and um like people are looking for that in a lot of places and trying to find it where they can get it. And when when people feel like they aren't getting those feelings of connection
mhm,
or belonging or validation, like
mhm,
from the larger society, or when the larger society um, is set up uh, to like intentionally not help people feel like they belong or feel connected to others, that is when folks are looking to things like fringe voices,
Mm-hmm.
or trying to look to entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
or are trying to sometimes look um, to yeah, like government, to the government for that belonging and connection. So I feel like that is also like that speaks to the importance of um, being able to create media and create community and create entertainment and create culture that like
Mm-hmm.
speaks to us and brings us together and reminds us that we are important,
Mm-hmm.
and can also like shut out and drown out and interrupt the fringe voices, um, especially like right wing conservative fringe voices who are trying to like peddle their really violent theories as like being both mainstream, but also like as being like the way that you will like achieve your best self. Um, and the way that they a lot of especially the male podcast hosts who
Mm-hmm.
are trying to like put forth these like very antiquated and very like misogynist and sexist and ableist and
Mm-hmm.
homophobic, transphobic ideas of like what it means to be a person, like in a heterosexual monogamous nuclear family, and what it means to like carry through like very strict gender roles.
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
like it's really important to
Mm-hmm.
drown out those voices. It's really
Yeah.
important to say that like actually like that is not what's
No.
going to actually like bring us closer to being our best selves. And also like that you are not a substitute for like us being able to build community,
Mm-hmm.
for us being able to like have robust like public systems and infrastructure that are working for us and that like reflect us. And that it is like the best world is not actually one where like all of these fringe voices are in charge, seemingly
Mm-hmm.
telling people that like by listening to them that like you are like fighting back against the system, when really like they are just stepping in as like the they are just
Puppets.
stepping in, yeah, as like
Yes.
the new like leader that you should be leading,
Mm-hmm.
while working really hard to like take away people's autonomy and self-determination.
Yeah, and also one thing to add to that, and thank you for bringing this up, is that a lot of these male podcasters, the Joe Rogans, the Andrew Tates of the world, the late Andrew Kirk, Charlie Kirk, I don't even, he's not worth remembering or getting his name right. This put that way. Um, but like what I do see is that there's this narrative that young men don't belong anywhere right now because women or LGBTQ people are you know making men less important in society, and that's a narrative I've been hearing quite a bit of, and it really showed up in a very toxic way. Like I remembered going to some of the universities doing talks on podcasts, and specifically in the Asian American youths. And what I've noticed is that I would always ask, who do you listen to? And there's always going to be that one or two person that's going to bring up Joe Rogan's name. And I cringe pretty obviously. And I'm just like, okay, all right, but it also tells me this is the pulse that I'm getting. And why has podcasting been such a very powerful instrument? And I think you allude to this, like in this what has COVID done, and also in this digital world, in this place where finding community is a challenge, and when you're dealing with a lot of like mental health issues that go unchecked, it can be very, I mean, I mean, the choices that people do make can really have an effect and can have a lifelong effect. And that's something that I do worry about. It's something that kind of like led me to, come back to it because there has to be more voices, but there also has to be voices from people actually doing the work um, because it's very easy to give into despair. And part of, I guess, having my quote unquote sanity um, or at least a relief is knowing the people that are still fighting with us or they're still fighting for us and what has that look like, how can we help support that, because I think that's very important to bring on. When I look at the work that you're doing, I feel very inspired. I mean, to be a street medic, to give us a hands-on look about what is happening in the communities, what are community members doing for each other that's not going to be captured in traditional media outlets, like like how do we bring these narratives to life, because that is how you fuel the movements and inform people of what's going on.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up like my work as a street medic or my work like doing care work like within community because it was actually like my experience navigating my mental health and my experience like surviving suicide that like led me down
Mhm,
a different path and a different pathway of being an organizer
mhm,
in my community. Like I've done so many different types of organizing, and I don't say that in like
mhm,
a bragging way, but just to like
mhm,
provide some context and have seen like really small local like hyper local organizations all the way up to like national philanthropic networks and um, I think one of the things that a lot of our movement spaces have in common, unless we are like really intentionally interrupting it, is like this overlap of like capitalism and
mhm,
ableism, right? Like there's a constant emphasis on productivity. There's a constant
mhm,
emphasis like on output and like
mhm,
even in the words that you were just using, like there's a constant emphasis on just like fighting and
mhm,
like coming from a place of fight and
mhm,
opposition all the time, right? And like you and I have talked about this so much, especially about like how little room there has been for grief and
mhm,
mourning.
mhm,
Like I know that like that's something,
mhm,
right, that like we
mhm,
had talked about like
mhm,
after your brother's death and
mhm,
the
yeah.
fact that because because of the medical leave that you had to take last summer, like that when your brother passed, like you
Mhm,
just didn't have enough medical leave, like you
yeah.
didn't have enough
Mhm,
medical leave. And like, what
mhm,
does that say to us as workers, like as employees,
mhm,
about how valued we are? Um, but I do think that one of the opportunities that we have in movement spaces
mhm,
um, is an opportunity to better understand each other as
mhm,
people and better care for each other's physical and mental needs,
mhm,
regardless of the strategies or tactics that we are using
mhm,
in our organizing, in our fights, in our activism, in our action. And for me, like that's why I shifted from being a frontline organizer and a frontline direct actioner to doing a lot more street medic work, crisis intervention work, grief work. Because for me, like in indirect action, it's really important that everybody like understands the strategy, like the why we are doing something,
mhm,
as well as the tactics, like the what of what we are doing. And there were so many times where I just like didn't agree, right? Like one of the schisms that shows up in movement spaces, not just in Chicago, but all over the place, is folks um, want to who want to see an abolition of the prison industrial complex, the military industrial
mhm,
complex, and systems of policing. Like I'm one of those people who are like up against folks who believe that reform can come within, and that like we just have to like do a little bit more fixing of the system, but that ultimately like the system will be able to like fix itself. That like if we give a little bit more money or training or like community input to like our police department or like our prisons, that they will be able to be reformed into like kinder, gentler institutions when that's not the case. And so
Hmm.
um, I found myself really frustrated with both the
Hmm. Hmm.
labor that was being asked of me and other organizers when we didn't necessarily have alignment on the strategies and tactics and even the values that we were like supposedly like asked to agree on.
Hmm.
But for
Hmm.
me, and this is likely part of my neurodivergence, like when I'm a medic, like I want to I am in a role where I am protecting folks from state violence. So at a protest, at an action, like in the world, because I will do like community jail support,
Hmm.
which welcomes folks who are criminalized just for existing. Rather than from doing political work or protest work, welcoming them back into the community. But so I I am very much like looking at people as like whole people, like regardless of what strategies you're using, what tactics you're using, the reason why you are encountering state violence, knowing that like I am in opposition to state violence. And so
Hmm.
that's why I shifted into that street medic role.
Hmm.
Um, and for me, it has helped connect me more to movements and movement work, but also helped me like better take care of myself within those spaces and create more room for um, to be able to educate folks through my social work background and like my mental health support background and through like my public health background and through the grief work that I've done and through the work I've done around disability justice. Yeah, I think
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
it's been so important for me and has really helped me feel less isolated. Like
Hmm.
being in a role where I'm actually like just connecting folks to care, connecting folks to resources, connecting folks to safety, um, and helping them make connection and feel less isolated.
Hmm.
Um, so that's been really important
Hmm.
to me. Um, I know like you also like used to be very like more heavily involved in community work than you are now.
Hmm.
And I actually have been like as a friend have been really proud of you for the ways that you have been able to like have stronger boundaries and step back
Hmm. Yeah.
and like take better care of yourself.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I'm curious, like from your experience, like when you were in movement spaces um, that felt really, really deeply isolating and like not supportive of mental health. What
Hmm.
do you feel like was missing? How do you feel like that contributed to like
Hmm.
what you were going through
Hmm.
and what you experienced?
Yeah, I think what I realized is like how absolutely terrified I am of crowds, especially like, which is kind of weird to me because I'm a big concert goer and I had lived in the city of Chicago. I have lived in Busan, Korea, which is very condensed. And so I felt like my existence has been around a lot of crowds and more times than not. And I know that people have asked me to join in protests, but I think, or marches, and I tend to back away from it, not because I didn't believe in it, not because I, um, you know, didn't want to take part of it because I didn't want to get in trouble. I think it was more of my fear of seeing people that I care about get hurt. It's very terrifying, and I get a lot of anxiety about thinking worst case scenarios. I come from a family that has really seen tragedies, And one of the things I used to promise my parents is that I will never put myself in danger, in harm's way, because I know that if they heard me going to a protest, it sends a red flag. It's very alarming to them because they don't want to see me gone as a
And
result of
also,
violence, right?
I bet like their context for protest and like
Mhm.
government opposition is like not from the US. Like it's from Vietnam, it's from Cambodia. And that is probably like, yeah, that probably informs like their fear as well.
Absolutely. And I think that has definitely created some stronger boundaries in some ways, but also that I think Michelle Kim, I've had this conversation with her, like there's no one right way to protest. There's no one universal way to protest. There's different multitudes of ways. How can I be supportive behind the scenes? How can I share information? How can I share resources? How can I be a space for organizers, to have private conversations where I can check in and say, hey, do you want to hang out for ice cream? Or because I know that survival is very challenging and people's lives, when you are constantly being surveillanced and being under attack, like I think it's always a reminder, like how can I at least pull you away for a moment so you can actually unpack and be able to rejuvenate from that. I think about other ways that I can be a supportive friend. I think about um, you know, think about the podcast and the storytelling work that I've done in the past and trying to get people to share their stories and also the blueprint of what they have done because this is the kind of things that you don't learn in history classes.
Mhm.
You don't learn
I
the
was,
blueprints of revolution.
that is for sure. Yeah. One of the things I was going to say is that like you're really good and you're really good at like checking in with
Mhm,
people. Like
mhm,
you're really good at like staying in touch with people and just like letting people know that you're thinking of them and letting people know that they're important to you. Like that's something um,
mhm.
that I like really admire about you. Like
Mhm,
one thing I really appreciate about our friendship, like
mhm.
that's a strength that
Yeah.
you have.
Mhm.
Um, and something that I have like learned from you in like how to do better. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate that because I know you have been very reciprocal and sometimes even more so. And like I think about in ways that I can try to deepen my compassion. How can it look? What can it look like, and do I always get it right? No. I mean, I know that I can piss off quite a bit of people, and I have, but I also know that I myself have to be humble enough. And I know I talk about humility. Like I don't believe in the idea of humility
You
at the
be
embrace.
humble.
Okay, okay. Well, there's parts of me that still exist in humility, but I think that there's certain things where I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna have to listen now. I'm gonna have to like sit back and really listen because I think that is very important for me to understand the discomfort or the distrust that people may have if I get out of line. And I think that's something I try to be very aware of. I think you talk about bonus years, and I know that I'm in bonus year number one, and I have a lot of boundaries. I'm starting to understand social situations that do not work for me. Like I feel much confident and safe talking to people one on one or one on two. But if there's like a group of 10 people at a dinner table you know, and it's all over the place, I get overstimulated and I get really overwhelmed and I have to think about exiting in the next hour and find out how am I going to exit gracefully. Have I always
Mhm.
succeeded in doing that? Not always. I definitely ruffled some feathers. And I've had to think about what being present means to me and how my presence affects people depending on the kind of energy that I bring in. So I'm being more thoughtful about that. I like one example, there was a Chicago Asian group, and they were doing a meetup for brunch in Chinatown. Um, and I live like 40 minutes away with traffic from my home to Chinatown. And when I arrived in Chinatown, there was a whole ass festival, street
Hmm.
festival. I couldn't find parking anywhere. Traffic was wild. I was becoming late, and
You
punctuality is a
hate
big
being
deal.
late. You
I
really hate
hate it.
being late.
I hate being late because it's like it gives me a lot of anxiety. I don't like to feel like I'm in a rush or in the middle of something. It feels like I have to catch up to that, and it gives me a lot of anxiety. So as I was circling around, I noticed that my own blood pressure was spiking. Like my Apple Watch was giving me this heart rate is increasing. And I'm like, well, gee,
Your
thank you.
Apple Watch was like, sit the fuck down,
And
take
I was
some
like, yeah, and I was like,
breaths.
as I was circling around, I was like, you know what? No, I cannot. No, I am going to drive back. I'm gonna drive back. I'm gonna go
Hmm.
find an Ace sushi, an all-you-can-eat sushi instead for myself because I can't do this. And I actually messaged the group. I said, "Look, I'm sorry, I can't make it. I'm in a city. The last thing I want to do is come in very annoyed, very upset, and bring bad energy. I don't want to bring that, but I also don't want to do it to myself. I don't want to force myself
Hmm.
or will myself into doing things that will not benefit anyone around me. And so I think about that a lot. I think about what my presence can mean. And that I want to be in a place where I feel I could be better served in. So that is one big thing that I have thought about speaking up. At work. Sometimes I'm still guilty of having people pleasing tendencies. Like I really do want the approval from my bosses, but I think funny enough, because I am going to talk with a podcast about toxic workplace environments, and I feel like I've become more outspoken, for better for worse. And I feel that now that I'm in my 40s, I have seen myself having to unlearn, toxic practices that were not beneficial to me. Thinking about productivity, thinking about, having to work so hard to get notice or to get like
Hmm.
a 1 minute acknowledgement. Like I don't care for that. Like I realized how detrimental that was, and something that I was thinking about recently was I used to get a lot of perfect attendance awards back in grade school, junior high, middle, and high school. And I did not realize what that conditioned me as a working adult. That that I always had to show up, you know, whether I was sick or not, and
Hmm.
whether I was mentally there or not. And I realized how harmful that was to me. And how I remember I didn't think about how harmful these kinds of things have led me to this idea of productivity equaling rewards. And that is not the case. I have seen my mom and dad who have been at their jobs for decades, my mom having a stroke at work while she was working 60 plus hours in her mid 50s when she didn't really need to by this point. My dad, lost his job suddenly after being a metal welder for like 25 years. And metal welding is a very physically demanding job, and
Hmm.
with no air conditioning and no heating too. So I think about how that intergenerational trauma and also what I was conditioned to through the US public education system have
Hmm.
forced me to bring this martyr version of myself that I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to will myself to do this work. I'm going to do it at all costs. And then last year happened and I didn't realize I was doing it again. Like I remembered I was working on a grant deadline and somewhere in the summer, I was terrified. This is what I get for watching The Bear, the last season of The Bear at that time, because
Hmm.
that was so intense because
Yeah.
I was having this frantic nightmare, like, oh my gosh, I didn't get this data. I didn't think about this question, and it's due like in 2 days, and I'm like running around and I'm absolutely having panic attacks over it because I was afraid that if I don't get this right, there's gonna be people that are gonna lose their jobs, including myself. And so that like this kind of behavior, this kind of mentality, really did me a lot of harm. And it drove me to the ground, for a lack of a better word. And I think the things that I was taught, I'm still having to unlearn what it means. I've been reading Trisha Hersey from the Nap Ministry. I think about people who are prioritizing rest in their work, not because we're trying to skirt away from responsibility, but we're trying to understand our capacity better. And how do we get transparent without feeling the shame of asking
Mhm.
for it? So,
Yeah, I mean, from what you just shared, like I hear so clearly, and like I also remember from like last August, like just the feelings of fear and frustration and overwhelm and desperation, just
mhm,
like all like colliding into one. Um, like we had been talking about that like before your suicide attempt, but then we
mhm,
talked about that a ton afterwards because it was a big part of like what led to like my leading up to my
mhm,
suicide attempt as well was like those really intense feelings of overwhelm and like not knowing where to turn, like not feeling like I had no solution and that
mhm,
like suicide was my only solution.
mhm,
And that it wasn't necessarily about like an individual kind of like crisis intervention
mhm,
moment. It was lots of different like overlapping cultural,
mhm,
societal, relational, like environmental pieces that intersected with like the like individual feelings of like overwhelm and fear that I had in that moment, right? Like it wasn't necessarily something that would have been able to be solved by a hotline, by like calling a hotline and
mhm,
like
mhm,
speaking to a stranger like in that moment, which I don't discredit those resources. I think that they're really important. I have been a helpline volunteer in the past
mhm,
for like
mhm,
an LGBTQ specific
mhm,
hotline that folks could call, where we would do crisis
mhm,
intervention with folks, and also just like general social support. But I also know that like there was so much more that I needed. There was so much more that you
mhm,
needed in those moments. Um, yeah, and so those are things that I think about as well.
mhm, mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious because like I know like I had come to you
Mhm,
with this idea of like let's have a conversation
yeah.
about about like suicide prevention, like this idea that is like
Mhm,
really heavily leaned upon in this month as like an awareness
mhm,
month, and how and also from our own experiences like
mhm,
really knowing that like so many of the solutions that are put forward by like mainstream like government and nonprofit
mhm,
organizations like often aren't holistic enough. um, so I'm curious to hear from you like
mhm.
what does suicide prevention even mean to you? Like, what do you think
Mhm.
it could look like?
I think my understanding, or at least what I'm seeing with suicide prevention, is when I think of 988, there is still a lot of uncertainty of who I'm talking to and what my conversation could lead to, and what that means. And I think to clarify more about that is like 988 is very different in all regions around the United States. Some use police presence and police intervention, um, and some use like mental health mobiles, I believe. So there's very different forms. So I think that there's always this uncertainty of when you tell your story, what does that person do with that story? Whether it's a care worker, whether it is law enforcement, medical therapist, to friend or family, church. Like, what happens when you tell your feelings when you are ready to get rid of yourself? And what does that person do? And I think that's something I sit with, um, because sometimes when I feel very dejected or very sad, I would want to talk to someone. I may contemplate it, but that doesn't mean that I will go through with it. So I always fear of what the response would look like, you know. And
Hmm.
when I went through my attempt last summer, you know, and I don't want to get too candid, but I will say that I had, you know, sent a group text to my closest friends, to a couple of my
Yeah.
closest friends
I
randomly.
and I
You were
was
one of
and
them.
I was part of that. Yeah.
You were one of them. And then I sent a separate text to my brother Tony. Now, my brother had absolutely no idea what was going on. He had no idea what I was dealing with, and neither did my family at the time, because I was afraid of how that was going to be seen as. And even though I'm in my 40s, I was still feeling this need to control my narrative with them. And and if I were to say, like, I want to do this, or I feel like killing myself, um, what is that going to look like? How is that going to affect my relationship with them? How is that going to affect what I would do next time? So
Hmm.
I think suicide prevention, there's a lot that goes into it. I also think of the forced institution of the involuntary hospitalization that happens. I was through that. Um, I want to say that can be very how that can be very um interesting, how it's tied to capitalism, and how this idea of like suicide prevention. I know this is very twisted for some folks, but like how in some ways it's like, okay, let's treat this person. Let's try to get them in for a week and get them prepared, because, you know, the way society is, we're a very productivity based culture. Like, it's through capitalism. Like, how can we prevent losing people when we need them in the workforce?
Hmm.
And I think about that part too. I know it's something I haven't really set enough time with, but it's in the back of my mind. It's like, is suicide prevention done as a way to prevent people from ending their lives because it would disrupt the money making scheme of capitalism?
I mean, I think that that is I think that that is not as controversial and as an idea as like you are framing it in this moment. But
Sure.
um, I'm curious, have you heard the term sanism before?
I have, but not in a specific context.
Yeah, so like sanism is this sanism is used to describe like prejudice or discrimination or
Mhm.
punishment that's like based on um, like people's actual mental health or their
Mhm.
neurodivergence or cognitive disabilities
Yeah.
or like our perception of people's like mental health or neurodivergence or
Mhm.
cognitive disabilities. So there's like such an emphasis on on sanity and on normalcy and on the
Mhm.
appearance of sanity and
Mhm.
normalcy. Like that's what sanism describes.
Mhm.
It's a term that I have learned from disability justice and mad liberation movements, and I am probably not doing justice to like the really expansive meaning and definition of sanism and its experience. But there's very simply like there is just such pressure within culture and
Mhm.
society and especially workplace culture and society to like speak and engage and act or sit or like move in certain ways,
Mhm.
right? And so like in in some senses, like in its quote unquote like least
Hmm.
harmful ways, like what that could look like in the office is that like people don't really talk about their problems.
Right.
They're like you come back from the weekend and like people ask like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And you're
Hmm.
like, "Yeah, I'm okay." Or like people aren't
Doing
really
doing the
speaking up
HR
about like, uh,
doing the HR 15-minute yoga plan.
yeah,
The
or
workplace, yeah.
like people aren't like there isn't space like after your brother died like you
Hmm.
only could take off like what was it like
Three,
3 business
three
days,
business days.
which is it's such bullshit, right? And then
Hmm.
like all the way like in its most harmful ways like sadism looks like, oh, if you are doing something that is like viewed as scary or harmful to people, especially like based on the ways that people are racialized.
Hmm.
Um, and this is how a lot of police murder has happened.
Hmm.
That there's this statistic that like 50% of all police murders, 40 to
Hmm.
50% of all police murders involve people who are disabled
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
some way. But you know, there have been instances um, in Black communities,
Hmm.
especially of folks who are autistic, of folks who are deaf, of
Hmm.
folks who are not performing normalcy in the way that society says they're supposed to, and then that leads to criminalization, that leads to
Hmm.
murder. Um, and
Yeah.
we've seen that like in that happens also like in Asian American communities as well.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
our comrade Rohan Zuli, who is like a writer
Yay.
and an organizer, like they recently wrote a piece about the murder of Asian Americans and how that is connected to mental health and
Hmm.
um, like I think about those cases in connection to resources that exist now, like 988 as
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
because 988 is in many ways like it is a reform, right?
Hmm.
Like it is trying to take our systems that exist
Hmm.
and say, like, we're going to fix them just a little because we know that they can work better. When maybe like being able to like call people and then like have someone come and intervene is actually like not a system that's like working for anybody. And like
Hmm.
there's a need to rethink it.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the things that I think about with a resource like 988 is that I will see posts on Instagram that are like don't call 988, it's dangerous, versus
Hmm.
like that I will see that type of post versus like other posts that are like, oh yay, there's 988, like we're not going to have like we don't need to defund, quote unquote, defund the police,
Hmm.
like 988
Hmm.
exists.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so we don't even have to like talk about abolition anymore, like, right? And actually I feel like the solution exists somewhere in the middle, and that
Hmm.
most of the people who are calling 988, especially when it's related to a family member or related to themselves, are like looking for those pieces that are really key actually to like preventing suicide and suicidality, that connection, that belonging, that validation. Like
Hmm.
they're not necessarily calling because
Hmm.
they want their family member to be harmed or they want themselves to be harmed. Um, but still, because 988 is a system that was like created by the government,
Hmm.
it still like enacts the harms of that government. Um, and so I won't get into like a really long explanation of like how government outsourcing works in the nonprofit world, but like in general, for folks who aren't aware, like a system like 988 will be created like through legislation, and then instead of the government running itself, they will say like we're going to take proposals from
Hmm.
like from nonprofit organizations that
Hmm.
will like run it for us, and then we'll give you the money to do it. And so that variation that you were talking about with 988
Hmm.
services is because of that like some of the nonprofits who are applying for and getting these contracts, so like because of where I live in Chicago, like if I were to call 988, my
Hmm.
neighborhood is served by a nonprofit that previously and may still like has a like abolitionist or like non-police intervention approach to mental health crisis. So that
Mhm.
means that like if I call 988 and I'm talking to those people, like they're not going to necessarily automatically send the police. But somebody else who lives even like half a mile from me is like
Mhm.
in a different service area. So they're getting a different nonprofit that is like picking up that call for
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that now and it that nonprofit like may not have that same viewpoint. And so
Mhm.
it's less about this like black and white answer, this like binary
Mhm.
answer of like don't call 988 because it's like a reformist measure and like oh 988 exists and will solve all of our problems to like it's actually about number one like knowing who the 988 providers are,
Mhm.
like being able to have like honest conversations about mental health and
Mhm.
suicidality in
Mhm.
general and like training service providers really
Mhm.
well to do that, but then also like creating lots of community resources and community networks and community connection um, within within our spaces, especially our geographic spaces, which like I can say this because I live in a city like Chicago.
Mhm.
I live in like a high density area and like know my most immediate neighbors, like the people that I like would share a hallway with, as well as a lot of people who like live on my street and in my neighborhood and feel safe doing that in general because of where I live. I know that there are people who like live next to people who actually like don't even want them to like be alive. And so like
Mhm.
I understand that like there's a difference in that. And so this isn't necessarily to say like everybody needs to like have that connection with their neighbors. But I do think that being able to have tools like care webs, like that
Mhm.
I learned about in the book Care Work, or mad mapping that I've learned
Mhm.
about from the organization Fireweed Collective, or pod mapping that I've learned about from Mia Mingus and the Bay
Mhm.
Area Transformative Justice Collective. Um, like having those be part of our friend groups, our community groups, which like community can be different than friends. I feel
Mhm.
like it should be in many ways. And then also like our movement groups, like those um, being able to like weave conversations about these resources and these tools and how they use them
Mhm.
to care for each other will actually, it makes our connections stronger. It makes our movement work stronger.
Mhm.
Um, and actually can maybe do a better job of suicide awareness and prevention um, than just like funding lots of hotlines but not necessarily changing the like material and social conditions that people are living with.
Yeah, and I think like there's also a fear of what's going to happen to me once I call 988, besides the
Mm-hmm.
local police intervention that comes into play, but also institutional care, involuntary hospitalization as we all know it. Um, I I have a lot to say about that in particular because it's a very challenging area. Like I'm very conflicted about what that looks like. And I will say that I had to spend a good week being there. Pretty much um I was pretty much kept away, from the world, so to speak. Like I did not have my cell phone for a week. Just imagine me being the very on person that I am. And I think like once people noticed that my Instagram stories went blank for 24 hours, that was a sign that something happened. And it felt like I had to reimagine this new reality I was living in temporarily. And it was a very it was at times a very stressful experience, especially that first day. Like, you're wondering how the hell did I get here? How did I decline fall apart so fast? And then losing the autonomy was very crushing at that time because
Mm-hmm.
I've always been used to being in control. Like I couldn't go anywhere without permission, I wasn't confined to a very small space, and I can only talk to like a handful of people a from the hospital phone. Um, and so it was very limited. And plus it was hard for me to sleep on this crappy cot that I was in. And I was in a room that had no clocks.
Hmm.
The wall was bare. And I'm like thinking to myself, how is this gonna help me? You know, how is some of the activities going to help me? Because I'm like what is care supposed to look like when it feels like a prison in some level? And I don't mind, and I don't
Yeah.
want to say, and I don't want to say this to, compare my experience to an actual prison, but it has this confinement and it has this um level of like not having autonomy, but also like what you're surrounded with.
Well, I think it's a fair comparison, actually.
Mhm,
And I know that there's organizations there's a group called Projectlets, and
mhm,
then the Fireweed Collective that I already mentioned. Like these are groups that do peer mental health work and peer-to-peer collective care work
mhm,
through an abolitionist lens. And
mhm,
like that their abolitionist lens like includes the abolition of like involuntary psychiatric care, because of the ways that it mirrors that like that aspect of the medical industrial complex like mirrors the
mhm,
prison industrial complex, and
mhm,
like says that like you don't actually know what's best for you, and that like
mhm,
you need to have your bodily autonomy taken away, and you need to have your ability to make your own decisions taken away. Like you don't get to choose what you eat or what you wear or how you spend your time or where
mhm,
you sleep or all of those things. And so I think it's okay to make that comparison,
mhm,
and others have made it, like especially in the context of abolition.
mhm.
um, but one of the things I was going to ask you, because I
Mhm,
remember,
mhm,
like I remember that week.
mhm,
We spent a lot of time during like when right as you were hospitalized, but then
mhm,
also like we spent a lot of time right when you were hospitalized, like in
mhm,
physical space together, and then
mhm,
like a bunch of time like while you were in the psychiatric unit, like
mhm,
talking on the phone.
mhm,
And I'm curious, like, I know that you were hesitant to like move from being in the um the general medical part of the hospital to the psychiatric unit of the hospital. Like you were really
mhm,
hesitant to do that and you did it anyways.
mhm,
Um, but I do know that like you were really nervous about it.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
what were some of the things that like that you were yeah that you were nervous about or that you were worried about, and that you might want people to know, in terms of like their own safety, or like in terms of if there are people that would be considering like having somebody else be involuntarily hospitalized.
Mhm. I will say that one of the things that I did get a good takeaway from the hospitalization was I had a really good there was a really good care team at the hospital that I
Mm-hmm.
felt like in ways humanized me, and it felt like I was actually being taken care of for the first time, because I think for a long time I felt like I did not have anyone, not to say that people did not care about me, that's not true. I felt like it was hard for me to allow anyone to take care of me in a sense. And I felt like once I was in the hospital, I realized what that actually looked like for me. So I think that was a big plus for me in some ways. And I think that was something I thought about. But it was also kind of sad that this was what I was missing. Um, yes, I was very nervous. I was very uncertain of what was going to happen. I was thinking about, what is my workplace going to say about this? What are my family members going to say? My
Mm-hmm.
parents, especially my mom. Um, like I was thinking about everyone else outside of my world because now this happens and this has blown up, and I'm trying to mentally do damage control on a PR level because I'm like, I don't want people to think I'm broken. I don't want people to think I'm a hopeless cause, you know? Like I think there was a part of me that was really trying to hold that narrative still. Um I'll say that I'll say that to enter in, it's like, yeah, it is frightening because you don't know what your day to day is going to look like. You don't know what what kind of treatment you will receive. Um and you're just trying to figure out what your day is going to look like all of a sudden. And knowing that I had to shift a lot of things, I had to also think about, well, I made an unsuccessful attempt. And now what? You know, it feels like everything that led up to it, like I felt like that was a whole now there's like a new line now. There's like a whole new era that I just created, for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was gonna end that particular era permanently. But now
My
all of a
gosh, you
sudden,
could go on your own Eras tour.
yes, era story. Um, yes. And yeah,
Surviving suicide, the Eras tour.
yeah, I mean, it'll be like different eras of my life, like different chapters, yeah, it'll be a very interesting syllabus, I must say. Um, but I think that it's also like, now what? What is going to happen to me? How is my relationship going to be affected? Um, and and what does the treatment look like? What are people going to listen to me? Are people going to take me seriously? And I think that was also a concern of mine too. So yeah, I think that is to say that yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
very terrifying because not everyone's experience is the same. My experience is not going to be the same for the next person. Um, there's different people with different needs that brought them there in the first place, whether it's voluntarily or done involuntarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was I was gonna ask, like, it's been it's been just over a year
Hmm.
since you're in this like new era of your life.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, what do you feel like you have learned? Like, what have you been doing differently? How have you
Hmm.
been like navigating your day to day?
Yeah. So after I got discharged, I was going into IOP, which is the in I can't even think of the right word for it.
Intensive outpatient.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I've done
Intensive.
it. I've done it twice. I'm such an IOP pro.
Yeah. And I did it online, and I literally had to play hardball with the powers that be to
Hmm.
do it because I'm like, I was nervous. I was very terrified about what my job was going to say about, like, okay, now I'm gonna have to like rewrite my entire schedule for the next 3 months. And like, how do I tell this to my boss? How do I navigate this? And also like the fact that at the time I wanted to I wanted to move quickly away from what had happened. Like I wanted to just get away from it. I did not want to be reminded about what I did. I did not want to be told. And I think
I remember you were very much like, well, I'm out of the hospital now, so like I'm done. I'm good,
in a
y'all.
way, I wasn't because I was like, I was getting the medication. I thought the medication I was on was working. Wellbutrin has made me a lot more sassy and more spicy than ever, which I love. But I felt like I was kind of on the right path. And I think I was arguing with a good friend of mine, and I said that I'm like really sick of this. I think this is silly, and I don't like this method, and I don't feel like I want to be confined the entire day being online. You know what I mean? Because I had to work remotely, like less than an hour later, I
Mhm.
have to be on for another 3 hours. And I'm just like, this is not the life for me. And I need to go outside. I need to be able to feel alive and not be confined, to this. But but my friend kept um reminding me, it's like, no, like you're not okay. Like you just got out of a very traumatic situation. And, you know, my brothers, some of my friends, including yourself, were, trying to help me think a certain view, a certain way about it, and like what does that look like for me? And I think that part of it was through fear, and part of it was also through being exhausted from it. And
Mhm.
the next few months when I was going through it, it was starting to become helpful because at least I was able to finally reflect and actually think about different ways of approaching certain situations, certain thought process. I learned about thoughts diffusion. I thought of there were mechanisms that I was able to use. Um, there was one moment when I knew that I really needed it was when I was at work one day and I just froze. I just had you know, this this moment and I felt like I had to excuse myself and go back home. And I realized that maybe I'm not out of the woods quite yet as I thought I was. And now I figured why I really needed it. But I think it was very helpful in some ways because it did allow me to rethink about the things that did not work for me prior to that, that actually contributed to my downfall. Um, about how I was viewing my relationship with work, how I was really viewing my relationships with people within my family and um, within my friends and acquaintances. Um, and I think what also was very helpful to me was going on the Vietnam Cambodia trip at the end of the year. My brother was dying at the time, and I was, obviously contemplating whether or not I should cancel that trip. And my brother called me and said, "No, you need to go through with it." And I said, "Well, you need to make sure that you're okay when I'm gone." And
I mean,
honestly,
he held on till you
he
got back.
he did. And like that trip was very life-changing to me. Like so much so that I still think about it quite often. Like it allowed me to experience something on my own and reconnect with a culture that at times I felt very distant from um and really guarded about because of not being such and such enough. And that is something that we all experience as Asian Americans. We experience the not enoughness. And
Hmm.
and to come back to it and being able to dictate it in my own way without having family members to visit, without bringing a family member. I felt like I need to do it on my own and to think about the narrative that I want for myself with this trip. And yeah, I had so much fun. I felt very free. It felt very freeing. And I learned a lot about myself. I thought it was a very healing, there were many healing moments. Some of it was very emotional for me, but I think that actually made me realize like, wow, to end the year in another country in Cambodia. I never thought that that was possible a couple of years ago. And here I was, dancing and on the rooftop of my hotel, to Cambodian music and realizing, gosh, you know, to think that a couple months ago my life would have ended. And then I'm here dancing into the new year of 2025. Um, when I got back home, 2 weeks later, my brother passes away. And,
Hmm.
for some reason, I always think that he was going to hold on for another several months because, knowing the way his life was going, it didn't seem very promising. But it, it really, it really, in a way, was hard to really process and take in. And I think when I look back on this year, that trip itself, and then the IOP, I think in ways that helped me to recover from what had happened prior, but it also in a
Hmm.
way set the stage for how I was going to grieve my brother's loss. And, I'm, gosh, like 9 months in, I believe. I mean, he died in middle of January, and I mean, I still
Yeah,
grieve.
it's been like almost exactly 9 months.
Yeah, and I mean, the holidays are going to be coming. His 1 year will come up before you know it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, yeah, I still grieve quite a bit. I mean, I have like a lot of happy moments. Don't get me wrong. I find joy. I mean, I will dance on TikTok. I will, you know, do things that I didn't feel like I was doing last year. Like I wanted to do things that was just more freeing and just more random. But part of it's because I had to fill some of the void that I was feeling. Because when I would drive by myself, at any point during the day, I think about my brother all the time. And yeah, I get very teary-eyed. I don't think there's a day that I don't shed a tear, and
Mhm.
thinking about that loss. And also thinking about what I had done last summer and how, you know, we as brothers, me, Andy, and Tony, we all reconnected at that same time. And for us to reconnect, as hard as it's for me to say, as a result of my near death experience, in a way, it, brought some level of peace between us and some connection that we really needed. And I think that was very helpful. So I wonder what would have happened had I
Mm,
not gone through
mhm.
with it, but somehow stayed the course and my brother passes, would I still be here now? I mean, I think
Yeah.
about the different scenarios that could play into my head, but like how that would have affected me had I not gone to IOP, had I not gone through my trip and my brother passes and other things that were still continuing from last year heading into it. I don't know if I would have been as lucky too. So that kind of goes to show that, yeah, nothing is very particularly linear. And
Hmm.
if you pick out one scenario or another, because a lot can happen and not everything is happens like if I did this route, this would have happened. It doesn't always work that way. And I think sometimes I kind of have to remind myself of that.
Hmm.
Yeah. But for you, like, um, what have you I know that you have touched upon this, but what have you been able to unlearn in your bonus years? Like the things that you subconsciously were trying to get away from that led you to what happened, and like what has been your
Mm,
approach to rewiring and or redirecting your energy towards.
yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting question. It's such a good question. I mean, I, we talked at the beginning about just like what it's like to be a person right now,
Hmm.
like what it's like to be alive in the world right now, and
Hmm.
um, how it's just like not fun for any of us. And like even within that, like I wouldn't necessarily to say I'm like having the best time
Hmm.
like being in the world right now. And also like I'm so grateful for like what these bonus years have given
Hmm.
me. Um, I I think that for me, like I have done similar to you, like have done a lot of slowing down.
Hmm.
Um, Part of that is because I've had to. That like prior to 2019, I had been living with chronic illness, and I still
Hmm.
am. Um, and that my chronic illness has been exacerbated like by having COVID,
Hmm.
and like living in a world where like COVID is still really present.
Hmm.
Like that's had an impact on both my physical health and like shifting my physical health, but has also had an impact on my mental health. And
Hmm.
so I have like slowed down a lot. My relationships have become a lot deeper. So like
Hmm.
I have fewer like really strong relationships, but the ones that I do, um,
Hmm.
like I haven't they have incredible depth, and I'm
Hmm.
so grateful for that.
Hmm.
Um, you know, like there are times when like I wish that I had like a lot more friends and a lot more acquaintances, and also that like the world was a place where like I could just be in the
Hmm.
world. With my chronic illnesses,
Hmm.
there are a lot of spaces that like I can't be in because there are so many other people that are unmasked, or I can't be in because like there's just like because there's no masking happening at all. And so that is sad. But I have definitely like learned a lot um, about relationship and like how to
Hmm.
just like really have depth of relationship. Um, I I spend a lot of time with my nibblings. I really,
Hmm.
really love my
Yeah.
nibblings. And have like they're such an important part of my life. And so I'm like so grateful that like one of the things that these bonus years have given me is getting to know them and like getting to watch them grow up and like
Hmm.
getting to like be part of like the like adults that are like helping them
Hmm.
become people.
Hmm.
Like it's such a gift. Um, I have I have gained a lot of clarity
Hmm.
around like my own purpose in the world and like the
Hmm.
things that like connect me to my own spirituality. And so that's been super important for me and like very, very grounding for me. Um, and just like fills me with a lot of warmth and a lot of hope.
Hmm.
Um, I will say like truthfully like not as much these past 18 months, but like
Hmm.
in general like has been a place of solace
Hmm.
for me. um and I also have like worked really hard and like proved to myself that there are things that like I can do that like I didn't think was possible.
Hmm.
So like I am like a small business owner, like I own and I run my own business, and
Hmm.
it's challenging and
Hmm.
it's rewarding. And I some days will wake up and like can't believe that like I am doing these things like
Hmm.
to like sustain myself, that like I am supporting myself in these ways. And so I think I just like often will wake up and realize that like wow, like I really am like I'm alive
Hmm.
and I'm living in the world and I'm connected to people and I'm connected to purpose and I'm connected to vision and I'm connected to hope. And I think that those
Hmm.
things are such
Hmm.
gifts.
Hmm.
Um, and if I weren't alive for it right now, um,
Hmm.
then I wouldn't be connected to those things. And
Hmm.
I wouldn't have been able to prove to myself that like I actually can survive some of the worst things that have happened to
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so those are ways that like I have gained like deeper appreciation for life. I mean, there are definitely things that like I wish I were not alive to see,
Same.
that I wish I didn't have to live through. Like I am very done living through historical events. I am very done
Hmm.
like living through character development. Like I'm very done. Kind of like there are some days where I'm very done growing as a person, but
Hmm.
like I don't actually. I'm like I can just chill for a little bit. I don't actually need to grow as a person every moment of every day.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, in general, I am grateful. Um,
Hmm.
and grateful for the opportunity to like connect with and to care for others and to
Hmm.
remind people that like their their presence in this world is essential.
Hmm.
um that like they're so important to this world, that like, and that's a belief that I have. Like I feel like in spite of myself, I am like a very earnest person. Like
Hmm.
it is a very like cringe part of myself that I have like
Hmm.
needed to come to appreciate, but that like I yeah, I believe that like the world is made better by the people who are in it.
Hmm.
That like the world is a better place because of what you individually bring to it. The world is a
Mhm.
better place because of like what so many of our other friends bring to it. The world is a better place because of like what others bring to it.
Yeah.
um and it's not my world to own. It's the world that I am like tasked with caring for this little bit of time that I am alive.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
and that has been a thing that I have grown to
Mhm.
appreciate. um the other thing that I wanted to share is that I think, going through experiencing my own survival of suicide and then accompanying you through
Mhm.
your experience surviving suicide has like really deepened my understanding of like what it means for us as
Mhm.
like a society and culture to like truly like dig into and um truly like make a place for like suicide prevention,
Mhm.
that goes beyond awareness, that goes beyond like, I know one of your biggest pet peeves is when people are like, well, I'm here if you want to call me. um, like it takes so much more than that, I think, like on
Mhm.
a societal and cultural level, but also like building our own individual muscle and
Mhm.
building our own skills.
Mhm.
Feel like, because of like my own political beliefs and like that are very um like very far left but also very like anti-authoritarian, that
Mhm.
I am like constantly rooted in a belief of autonomy, and that like we actually like can learn to do so many things, that like we don't have to outsource our expertise to other people, we don't have to outsource our knowledge to other people, like we
Mhm.
can learn to do things together, we can learn
Mhm.
to do things ourselves, and like by doing those things we
Mhm.
actually can move further away from like harmful institutions within the government, within prisons, within militaries. um, and so it's made me incredibly passionate about just how we have to like
Mhm.
completely transform the world is like our best suicide
Mhm.
prevention, like to care for each other deeply and like really really tangible and material ways, but to also like change the conditions that we're living in so that people remember why they want to be alive.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, I truly appreciate you taking us through the deep dive, but also like really painting a vision of what care can really look like if we do things differently. And if we start to reimagine things in a more compassionate, attuned way. And I was going to ask you about like, what does friendships mean to you since your attempt? Like, what kind of friends do you connect with, or do you that you feel like you receive better from, or that you feel like that you are more in alignment with? Because I think in my case, I want someone who is very thoughtful, who is very engaged as a listener. And I feel like it's not about you having solutions for like I'm not looking for a solution. I'm not looking for you to stop me. I'm looking for a place where I need space to just talk and to just be able to breathe and not feel like I'm alone in this. And that is
Mm-hmm.
something I think about because I use because certain people have told me like, gosh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Like I feel like I have nothing else to really say in a way. And I said, well, no, that's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is that like just the care, just to know that I can trust you with what I'm sharing, and
Mm-hmm.
that I can at least let go of some of the uncertainty that I'm holding.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, for me, like the thing that I really
Mhm.
value most about my closest friendships is reciprocity.
Mhm.
Um, so like being able to show up for each other in lots of different
Mhm.
situations and circumstances. Um, and also like being able to have being able to have fun together, but also being able um, to like really support each other,
Mhm.
and to feel a sense of like really strong connection and belonging,
Mhm.
from people, and also that like people are not necessarily going to like people are going to do their best to like
Mhm.
not be to not cause
Mhm.
harm, and
Mhm.
that like when when they do, like they're actually going to like take clear and concrete steps to like
Mhm.
repair harm, rather than like being in denial of it, or believing that instances of harm and abuse,
Mhm.
and hurt have like not impacted me. Um, like one of the so like I we talk so often, and like
Mhm.
we've like said these words to each other, but one of the things that I like most appreciate about our friendship is that
Mhm.
like we we have like seen we can and like have seen each other through so many different
Mhm.
moods,
Mhm.
that like because of the type of work that I do, like both in my paid work and also like in my community and organizing work, that like often I'm the friend that people call when there's like a crisis,
Mhm.
or like they have to make a really hard decision, or they need help.
Mhm.
But they're and I I uh, I really appreciate that like people
Mhm.
lean on me in those ways and like trust me in like those really, really vulnerable moments of their lives. But I have fewer friends that, see me as like the fun friend, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not necessarily a person who's like super fun all the time. Like I am neurodivergent and I am sober. I've been sober for like many, many years.
Mhm.
And I'm also disabled, and like so only like go out into like public spaces where I'm able to mask and where like other people are masking. And so, maybe that's not like who you think of when you're like thinking most of fun, but like, in our
Mhm.
friendship, that like you and I have, you're the type of person that like I can call,
Mhm.
or that like will call me if
Mhm.
we're like completely in tears. Like I have
Mhm.
called you
Mhm.
when I'm like in tears and like having the worst day of my life, but also like you're a person who will like reach out
Mhm.
to like go to a concert together,
Mhm.
or who will call to like talk shit about Justin Timberlake, or
Mhm.
will like call and
Mhm.
like you'll ask like my thoughts about like the WNBA season,
Mhm.
or like the
Mhm.
NBA draft, or like the trades that are happening in the off season. And so like I feel like because we can both like have fun and like be like have real connection in like in very, very unserious moments, as well as like really be there for
Mhm.
each other in reliable ways
Mhm.
in like really, really serious
Mhm.
times, whether it's like mental health stuff,
Mhm.
whether it's
Mhm.
it's like trauma and violence, whether it's community harm, um, that like those are things that I appreciate in the relationship, like the spectrum of that.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like being the person that is like only there for people when they're going through a hard thing, but that like they
True.
go and off and like have fun with others.
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
also, like have had a hard time like being in spaces where people are just having fun, but like they're not. I like might bring up something that is related to social justice or related to like current events, and they like
Mm.
don't want to talk about it at all.
Mhm.
Um, and so
Like
it's
the
that
Debbie Downer.
balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that balance
Mhm.
for me that has been really important in not just friendships in general, but I think our friendship, and like
Yeah.
one of the reasons that I thought that this conversation,
Mhm.
about mental health and about surviving suicide and kind of what's on the other what can happen on the other side of that
Yeah.
was really important to me.
Yeah. And this is why I accepted your invitation to do this because like this is something that I think about often about the relationships I have with people, including yourself, and how that has been instrumental in my recovery as we speak, and how it has equipped me to think of ways to be a better friend and to think of my relationships with people in general that I'm in contact with, setting a reasonable expectation, knowing that expectations can shift, and being not afraid to be transparent. And, you know, um, I I want to also say that you are a very funny person. I do laugh a lot. You do like to shade and roast me like on post and sometimes like responses like, geez, Jung, did you have to go there already? I mean, I do have a very good laugh at it. And sometimes I'm like, I have said that when I do a birthday roast one day, I don't know when, I feel like there's a couple people that would be glad to do it. And for some people, it might be therapy. I think for you, it'll definitely be like part therapy, I guess, in some ways, therapeutic in a way, but also because I feel like you have so much of that energy that's still untapped that you would like to play comedian as. But I think you're very funny and you're very observant. And I love that about you because you observe things that sometimes I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way, you know? So, yes.
Well, I'm really glad we got to have this conversation. Thanks for letting me suggest it,
Yeah.
Randy.
And
And
yeah,
I I also just want to say, I've said this so many times, but like I'm happy that you are alive. I'm
me too.
happy that you are still in this world.
Me too. And I'm glad that that the bonus years have given me a chance to deepen our friendship and that is really, that I've got to experience even better things from you since then. I mean, from 2019 to now to 2020, towards the end of 2025, it's like, gosh, to see the transformation and and the evolution of our friendship has been very meaningful. So I'm always very grateful for this experience and look forward to seeing how we can um, create more opportunities and hopefully create and experience more joyful moments.
Yay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jung. I really appreciate your time and everything. All the best
Yeah,
to you.
thank you.
Mhm.